So hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. Last 8 months economy current affairs analysis session. In our previous session we have understood polity related current affairs, and in this session we will be discussing economy related current affairs. And this discussion will be helpful for your upcoming prelims examination, and we have selected few important and most relevant current affairs from the economy subject, and they will be certainly helpful for you in the upcoming examination. And in fact, so if you look at the nature of questions in the economy, very often questions are asked linking the static topics with the dynamic topics. Here the dynamic topics are the current affairs, right? So this discussion specifically focuses on the prelims examination, right? So whatever we discuss, we discuss in such a manner that this will be helpful for your prelims examination. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important articles, and the first current affairs issue that we are going to discuss is about the central government has launched a new solar power scheme for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now it is very important for you to understand what are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, because there may be questions on this as well. So we will also understand what is this solar scheme and which ministry has launched this solar scheme, or this solar power scheme is under which ministry. So we all knew that the union government has launched Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan. So this is also known as PMJMAN scheme. So you may get a question that PMJMAN scheme is related to which of the following. So PMJMAN scheme is about the development of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, right? So in India we have some around 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups across different states and union territories of our country. So one thing that you need to remember is that PMJMAN scheme is about the development of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups in India. Now when we specifically talk about the solar power scheme for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, so electrification of at least 1 lakh particularly vulnerable tribal group households through the off-grid solar power scheme. So we knew that solar power is a renewable form of energy, and electricity access is a very important for the overall development of any household, any family or village. So therefore, because of this particular reason, so when we talk about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, so they very often live in remote rural areas. So due to some infrastructure shortcomings, so we may not be able to ensure, or we may not be able to provide them the grid connected power. So because of that reason, the government has been thinking about providing electricity to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups through the solar power. And in fact, so what is the timeline? The timeline is 2023-24 to 25-26, right? So a 2-year timeline has been announced by the government under PMJMAN scheme. And in fact, the solar power to each of these 1 lakh particularly vulnerable tribal groups would be provided under a scheme called PMJMAN scheme, and the timeline is 2 years. And the ministry which monitors the implementation of the solar power scheme for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and Ministry of Tribal Affairs. So this is also very, very important. You just have to remember this, right? So the solar power scheme for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups would be monitored by the two ministries, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy as well as Ministry of Tribal Affairs. And you can also see the aim and objective of the solar power scheme for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So in fact, so it is a very basic thing that to provide basic facilities for the particularly vulnerable tribal group households, particularly providing housing, clean drinking water, sanitation, and improved access to education, healthcare. So these are all the basic objectives of the PMJMAN scheme. But one thing that you need to remember, that PMJMAN scheme is specifically aimed at the inclusive development of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So there are some details with respect to PVTGs, so we will also try to understand those details. And remember that UPSC has already asked one question on particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So what is the criteria to identify the particularly vulnerable tribal groups? For example, in India there are scheduled castes, right, and scheduled tribes also. There are different tribal groups, but there is a specific criteria through which we could identify the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. The criteria is that those tribal groups who have the pre-agricultural level of technology. So they have a pre-agricultural level of technology. That means they don't have technology, right? So in fact they are isolated and they don't have the technology. And in fact, so if you look at the literacy levels of these tribal groups, so it is very low, it is negligible, and this could be the second criteria for the identifying the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And apart from that, so economic backwardness is another criteria for identifying particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And then declining or stagnant population is also another major criteria. So you just have to remember that there are 4 important criteria for identifying particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So you just have to remember, so these 4 criteria, they are pre-agricultural level of technology, low levels of literacy rates and economic backwardness, and declining or stagnant population from that tribal group. And in fact, for example, when I say particularly vulnerable tribal groups, sentinels, right, sentinel who live in Sentinel Island of Andaman Nicobar group of island are categorized as particularly vulnerable tribal groups, right? So in fact there are number of such tribal groups who live in India, and currently in India there are 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So in the year 2006, so the particularly vulnerable tribal groups were as a name given, right? So a particular tribal group name changed into particular vulnerable tribal groups in the year 2006. And you just have to remember that as of now in India there are 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And in fact it was first recognized in the year 1975 as a primitive tribal group on the recommendations of Debar Committee. So please remember that this is the Debar Commission. So based on the recommendations of the Debar Commission in the year 1975, this primitive tribal groups are identified. However, so in the year 2006, these primitive tribal groups were renamed as particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and as of now in India there are 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And in fact they are centrally recognized as special categories among the existing scheduled tribe. And one thing that you need to understand is that as of now we have the scheduled tribe category, but all scheduled tribe cannot be categorized as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So within scheduled tribes there are some caste groups, so those who are having all the criteria, so they can be identified as particularly vulnerable tribal groups, right? So I hope you have understood this in a very broad manner. And the next topic is about urea gold. So urea gold is also recently in news, and this is with respect to economy as well as agriculture, and it is also very important. So because of that reason we have included this. Now we'll try to understand what is urea gold and what are the advantages and benefits of it. Specifically we will try to discuss this from the prelims perspective. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has approved the launch of urea gold, right? So the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has decided to launch the urea gold, or it has approved the urea gold, right? So we all knew that the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs is very often chaired by whom? So it is chaired by the Prime Minister, and in fact the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs takes important decisions, right? So it announces or it takes important decisions. And in fact, so when we talk about this urea gold specifically, so this will support other initiative of the government in the sphere of environmental friendly fertilizer. So one thing that we need to understand, Indian agriculture is in Indian agriculture there is excess use of fertilizer, right? So there is excess or increased use of fertilizer. So with that, what has been happening? So excess use of fertilizer has been a leading cause of degradation of soil, right? So it results in degradation of soil and pollution of natural resources, pollution of natural resources, and it is also increases input cost. It also increases input cost on the farmers, and because of that reason it is very important that we need to find out sustainable alternatives to fertilizer, so that could prevent degradation of soil, and that could prevent pollution of the natural resources, and that could also reduce the input costs on farmers. And because of that reason, the government has been coming up with various such initiatives, right? For example, neem coated urea, liquid urea, and urea gold. So all these things are essentially aimed at reducing the input cost on the part of the farmers and also protecting or conserving the natural resources. In order to promote the appropriate use of fertilizers, Union government has launched a scheme called Soil Health Card Scheme, right? Soil Health Card Scheme. I hope you knew about this scheme. So government provides a soil health card, so with recommendations of the fertilizers which are required for one particular soil sample. So that is Soil Health Card Scheme. So however, so all these initiatives of the government are part of environmental friendly fertilizer initiatives. So some details with respect to urea gold specifically, and this is very important. So the urea gold is sulfur coated urea. So you just have to remember this. Urea gold is sulfur coated urea, and in fact it is non-organic slow release fertilizer. This urea gold is non-organic and also slow release fertilizer, and it is generally prepared by coating preheated urea granules with the molten sulfur. So remember that from your prelims perspective, this is very, very important because it is a sulfur coated urea, and it is also a non-organic, and it is a slow release fertilizer. Now when you use urea gold, so it slowly releases into the soil, right? So providing nutrients to the plants. So that's why it is very, very important. And in fact, the sulfur coating ensures a more gradual release of the nitrogen. So nitrogen would be released gradually instead of just exhausting in a very short period of time. So that makes farmers use more urea, right, to replenish or to provide nutrients to the plants. So but this sulfur coating ensures a gradual or slow release of nitrogen, so thereby adequately providing nutrients to the plants. Thereby farmers could reduce the use of urea very frequently. And in fact, the Indian Council of Agriculture Research study use of the sulfur coated urea that would further leads to the reduction in urea consumption by 25%. Remember that what is the objective of bringing all these initiatives specifically with respect to fertilizer? So one of the objective is to reduce the input cost, right? So the use of sulfur coated urea would certainly reduce the consumption of urea by at least 25%. So that could substantially reduces the input cost on the farmers, and it could also reduce the degradation of soil and also the pollution of natural resources because of the excess use of these fertilizers. And there are some benefits with respect to the use of environmental friendly fertilizers such as urea gold. So it would decrease nitrogen oxide emissions. So we all knew that nitrogen oxide is a potential greenhouse gas, right? So, and it is also a pollutant, and because of that reason, so we need to use environment friendly fertilizer. And it could also improve the water retention and water holding capacities, and it could adjust soil pH, and it could also increase the organic matter as well. Now when we talk about the sulfur coated urea, so you have to remember few things. So the soil health card scheme that is launched by the union government, and also what is this sulfur coated urea as well, and what are the benefits and advantages of the urea gold. And next article is ATAL SETU NAVASA C-link. So this is also in use in recent times, so we'll try to understand this. What is this ATAL SETU NAVASA C-link? See, the objective of constructing tunnels, constructing a sea link or bridges is essentially to reduce the time, also reduce the distance, and it is part of infrastructure development programs of the governments. So ATAL SETU NAVASA C link, it was inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And in fact, so one thing that you need to remember about this ATAL SETU NAVASA C link is that it is country's largest sea bridge. So you can see here, so it is India's largest sea bridge. So that has been connecting two different regions over the sea in Maharashtra. So where it is located, country's largest sea bridge is ATAL SETU NAVASA C link. You just have to remember. So it is located in Mumbai, Maharashtra. It is located in Mumbai, Maharashtra, and it is country's longest sea bridge, and it is also referred to as Mumbai Trans Harbour Link, right? So it is also known as Mumbai Trans Harbour Link. So when we talk about the length of this ATAL SETU NAVASA C link is that, so it is 21.8 kilometers long, and that's why it is known as the country's longest sea bridge, of which 16.5 kilometers is built completely over the sea. So you can see this is the component which is 16.5 kilometers of this sea link is entirely built over the sea. However, the total length of this sea link is that 21.8 kilometers, and it connects two different regions in Mumbai. So one is Savory in Mumbai, right? So this is Savory. So it connects Savory in Mumbai with Navaseva in Raigad district, so thereby easing travel substantially between Mumbai and Navi Mumbai. So I hope you have understood about this ATAL SETU NAVASA C link. And then we'll proceed on to discuss the next important topic, that is Payments Infrastructure Development Fund scheme. So we'll try to understand what is this Payment Infrastructure Development Fund in a very broad and detailed manner. So specifically for you, it will be helpful for your prelims examination. Now, what is this Payment Infrastructure and Development Fund? So we'll try to understand that. So because of this reason that RBI recently extends Payment Infrastructure and Development Fund scheme till 2025. So you may get a question that recently RBI extends Payment Infrastructure and Development Fund scheme till which of the following year? So till 2025. Now, when we talk about some details with respect to Payment Infrastructure and Development Fund scheme, so it was first operationalized in the year 2021 for up to 3 years, right? So it was first operationalized in the year 2021 with the time period of 3 years, but recently RBI expanded this up to 2025. And what is the aim of Payment Infrastructure and Development Fund scheme? So it aims to encourage deployment of payment acceptance infrastructure, right? So it ensures the deployment of payment acceptance infrastructure such as physical point of sale terminals, quick response codes or QR codes in Tier 3 and Tier 6 centers, northeastern states, union territories, and Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh. So in all these areas, and because of that reason, you should have to understand this. Now, when we talk about the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, so it talks about the deployment of payment acceptance infrastructure. And the other thing is that Payment Infrastructure Development Fund is governed through Advisory Council, and it is managed and administered by the Reserve Bank of India. So you may also get a question that the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund scheme is managed and administered by which of the following ministries or which of the following agencies. So it is RBI which manages and administers this Payment Infrastructure Development Fund. So types of acceptance devices which are being covered as part of the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, including physical point of sale machines and mobile point of sale, GPRS, and also public switched telephone networks. So all these devices are being accepted or being covered as part of the Physical Infrastructure Development Fund. So next article is the domestic systematically important banks. So recently the Reserve Bank of India releases 2023 list of domestic systematically important banks. Remember, this is very important, right? So you may get a question that which of the following banks are domestic systematically important banks, and who releases the list of domestic systematically important banks? The answer is that the Reserve Bank of India releases the list of domestic systematically important banks. Now in India there are some big large banks, right? So they are also known as too big to fail. Too big to fail. So they are a very big banks, and they are very important banks in India, right? So those banks are known as domestic systematically important banks. And in fact the list of domestic systematically important banks is released by RBI. And in fact, so the domestic systematically important banks are important because of their huge size, right? So they are very huge, and they have a presence all across India, and in fact they are also undertaking the cross jurisdictional activities, and that means that they have their branches in other countries also. And the complexity and also lack of substitute and interconnection, so because of all these reasons, so these banks are very important, and that's why they are known as domestic systematically important banks. So domestic systematically important banks also means that they are too big to fail, right? So you may also get a question, too big to fail is in the context of which of the following? So it is in the context of domestic systematically important banks. And in fact the domestic systematically important banks framework of RBI, and in fact so it is being based or regulation, declaration of domestically systematic important banks is based on the framework of RBI, which was released in the year 2014. And in fact, so as of now the banks are being placed on 5 buckets, and when we talk about India, there are only 3 banks in India. So this is also very important, only 3 banks which are as of now categorized as domestic systematically important banks. So what are those 3 banks? The State Bank of India, and secondly HDFC Bank, and third ICICI Bank, right? So these are 3 domestic systematically important banks which are being published by Reserve Bank of India domestic systematically important bank list in the year 2023. So you just have to remember this. And next article is, or next topic that we are going to discuss is reverse flip. So we'll try to understand what exactly is this reverse flip. So reverse flip is a term which is very often in news in recent times, right? So in fact, across the world, new startups are being started, right? So there are several startups which are being started across different parts of the world. However, in India also we have the third largest startup ecosystem. So third largest startup ecosystem, especially after US and China. So when we talk about the number of unicorns in India, so USA is in first place in terms of number of unicorns, followed by China and followed by India, right? So what is a unicorn? Unicorn is any company so which is privately owned and its net its overall value is more than 1 billion, right? So its overall value is more than 1 billion, and that is known as unicorn. And when we talk about the number of unicorns in different countries across the world, so US has more number of unicorns, followed by China and followed by India, right? So I hope you have understood what is a unicorn. So we'll try to discuss this unicorn later, right? Unicorn is any company whose valuation is more than 1 billion. And in fact, so many startups as of now are doing this reverse flipping. Now what is reverse flipping? So we'll try to understand this is, so reverse flipping means moving their overseas holding entities to India. So they are moving their overseas holding entities to India. So reverse flipping, it is a term which is being used to describe the trend of overseas startups shifting their domicile to India and also listing on the Indian stock exchanges. So we'll understand why these startups are doing this reverse flipping, right? For example, imagine that there's a company A, and the company A's base is in Spain, for example. So its base is in Spain, right? So it is a overseas holding entity, but it has moved to India. So that is known as the reverse flipping. So its base is shifted to India, and that is known as reverse flipping. So it is a term which is used to describe the overseas startups shifting their domicile to India, and also they start listing on the Indian stock exchanges as well, right? So because they wanted to become part of India's growth story, because India has huge and enormous potential, and because of that reason, so what they are doing, they are just shifting their domicile to India. So originally located in Spain, but they shifted their domicile to India, and they also started listing in the Indian stock market or Indian stock exchanges as well. And what are the reasons for the reverse flipping? So there are certain reasons for the reverse flipping. So capitalize on India's large and growing economy is one reason, and they also wanted to access deeper pools of venture capital. Okay, so Economic Survey 22-23 recognized the concept of reverse flipping, right? So it has recognized the concept of reverse flipping. So so there may be a question that the term reverse flipping is related to what, right? So what is reverse flipping is associated with, right? So Economic Survey 22-23 recognized the concept of reverse flipping, and in fact Economic Survey itself has proposed there are certain ways to accelerate the process of the reverse flipping, right? So through these certain processes, the reverse flipping process can be further accelerated, and such as simplifying the corporate laws, and also the capital movements, and also simplification of the taxation. So all these things can be done, and they are being pointed out by the Economic Survey in the year 22-23 to further encourage and to further promote reverse flipping in the Indian economy. So I hope you have understood what is reverse flipping. And the next is 16th Finance Commission is recently set up by President. Okay, so in this context it is very important, right? So 16th Finance Commission is a constitutional body. So it is a constitutional body. It is a constitutional body because it is being mentioned in the Indian Constitution, right? So Indian Constitution has provided for the establishment of the Finance Commission. So it is being provided in Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, right? So currently the 16th Finance Commission has, as of now we have the 15th Finance Commission, right? Because the 16th Finance Commission's recommendations will commence from April 1st 2026. So therefore currently we have the term of 15th Finance Commission, but 16th Finance Commission is already established, right? So in fact the 16th Finance Commission is constituted with the approval of the President of India in pursuance of Article 280 Clause 1 of the Indian Constitution, right? So one thing that you need to remember, which is very, very important, that this Finance Commission is a constitutional body because Indian Constitution in Article 280 has provided for the Finance Commission, right? So it was constituted with the approval of the President of India in pursuance of Article 280 of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, so who is the chairman of the 16th Finance Commission? The chairman of the 16th Finance Commission is Aravind Panagaria, right? So Aravind Panagaria was the former vice chairman of the Niti Aayog. Now when we talk about the chairman of the Niti Aayog, who is the chairman of Niti Aayog? The chairman is the Prime Minister, but Aravind Panagaria was the former chairman of Niti Aayog, but now he is appointed as the chairman of the 16th Finance Commission by the President, right? Who appoints the chairman of the Finance Commission? President appoints. And who appoints the Finance Commission? Once in 5 years. President again appoints the Finance Commission once in 5 years. So I hope it is very, very clear about this. And the commission's work, the Finance Commission's work. Now why the Finance Commission is being appointed by the President? So Finance Commission's responsibility is to make recommendations on the vertical and horizontal devolution of funds and finances between the center and the states and between all the states. For example, so there are two different types of devolution. For example, horizontal devolution, okay, horizontal devolution, as well as vertical devolution, right? Vertical devolution of funds. So when we talk about the horizontal devolution of funds, so it means a distribution or devolution of funds to different states, right? So for example, state Karnataka would receive around for example, so just for the sake of example, I would say that Karnataka would receive around 8,000 crore, right? So 8,000 crore based on the recommendations of the Finance Commission. But Uttar Pradesh would receive 15,000 crore, right? So because of the population, because of the economic backwardness that they have, because of the per capita income, right? So because of all those reasons, Uttar Pradesh may get 15,000 crore and Karnataka may get 8,000 crore. It is not like all states would receive the same amount from the Finance Commission, from the center, based on the recommendations of the 16th Finance Commission. So there are different parameters which are being considered when it comes to devolving funds by the center to various states. So this devolution is known as horizontal devolution. And the vertical devolution means, for example, out of 1 lakh crore. So imagine that this is 1 lakh crore, a total total pool of taxes that have to be that have to be shared between both center and states. So how much of this 1 lakh crore would belong to the center and how much would belong to the states? For example, center would keep it with self 40,000 crore and remaining 60,000 crore would be given to the states, right? So this 60,000 crore would again come under the horizontal devolution, right? So it again horizontal devolution. So that is how Finance Commission actually works. So it makes decisions, or its key responsibility is to decide on both vertical and horizontal devolution as well. And in fact, the 16th Finance Commission recommendations, once they are being accepted by the government, so they would cover the period of 5 years starting from April 1st 2026. Here few things that you need to remember, they are very important. So one is 16th Finance Commission is a constitutional body under Article 280 of the Constitution, and the chairman of the Finance Commission, 16th Finance Commission, is Arvind Pangaria. And you should also understand what is vertical devolution and horizontal devolution. And the 16th Finance Commission's recommendations would come into effect from April 1st 2026 for 5 years. And there are some additional details also with respect to the 15th Finance Commission. So 16th Finance Commission is chaired by Arvind Pangaria, but 15th Finance Commission is chaired by N.K. Singh. So currently we have been in the period of the 16th Finance Commission, and 15th Finance Commission was set up by the President in the year 2027 to make recommendations for 2021, 21-22, from 21-22 to 25-26, 5 years, right? So it was set up in 2017. Remember, this is also very important because previously there were questions on Finance Commission, chairman of the Finance Commission. So all those things are being asked. And so I have just explained what is horizontal devolution and vertical devolution. So for vertical devolution, the share of states in central taxes is to be 41%, right? So 41% is the share of states from the central taxes. And in fact, the 15th Finance Commission also suggested to reduce the fiscal deficit to 4% of GDP by 25-26. Remember, this is very, very important, right? 15th Finance Commission has suggested to reduce the fiscal deficit by which year, and how much fiscal deficit should be reduced as suggested by the 15th Finance Commission, right? So all these things are very, very important. You just have to keep them in mind. And the next topic is unified payment interface. So this is also very, very important, right? Because previously also there were a number of questions which are asked from the unified payments interface. So we'll try to understand this as well. So the Reserve Bank of India has recently announced new rules and regulations to further enhance the scope of the unified payment interface. Okay, so because of that reason, unified payment interface is in news. So we'll also try to understand what exactly is the unified payment interface. So it was developed by the National Payments Corporation of India in the year 2016. So in 2016, so it was developed by the National Payments Corporation of India. See, a few things that you should remember in this specific thing, that UPI means Unified Payment Interface. So it was developed by the National Payments Corporation of India in the year 2016. Right, so after demonetization, so National Payments Corporation of India has developed the unified payment interface for the digital transactions, and it was built over the immediate payment service infrastructure, right? So it was developed by the National Payments Corporation of India, but it was built over the immediate payment service infrastructure. And in fact, it is the most successful real-time payment system globally, providing simplicity, safety, security, and person-to-person and person-to-merchant transactions across India. So what are the new features of this unified payment interface? So you just have to remember this. This is very important from your exam perspective. So there are certain features which are being developed as part of the unified payment interface. So one is a credit line will be provided by the banks on unified payment interface, because it enables a pre-sanctioned credit lines from the banks via UPI. For example, earlier what generally happened is that you could transact money, so when you have money in your account, but as of now there will be credit line in UPI, so that is being sanctioned or approved by the banks, and you can also transact even if you have not deposited money into your account. And secondly, UPI Lite X. So UPI Lite X means that users can send and receive money through offline or through any compatible device that supports near field communication. So this is also very important, that as of now UPI transactions can only be made through the online mode, so you cannot do them offline mode. However, recently even through small phones also you can do the UPI transactions, but UPI Lite X means so you can do the transactions both offline and online mode as well with any compatible devices. So that specifically supports this NFC, so that means near field communication technology. And next, National Multidimensional Poverty Index. So we'll try to understand what exactly is National Multidimensional Poverty Index and who releases National Multidimensional Poverty Index. Remember, this is very important, that Niti Aayog releases National Multidimensional Poverty Index. I'm stressing it again, that Niti Aayog releases the National Multidimensional Poverty Index. And in fact, Niti Aayog has recently released a discussion paper, and this discussion paper, which is released by Niti Aayog, titled Multidimensional Poverty in India since 2005 to 2006. Now, what is this multidimensional poverty? So we'll just try to understand this. So multidimensional poverty means multiple deprivation. Okay, so it is multiple deprivation. So what is multiple deprivation? So lack of housing, lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, lack of electricity, lack of sanitation, right? So and malnutrition or lack of nutritious food, hunger. So all these things can be considered as multiple deprivation, and multiple deprivation is the essence of multidimensional poverty index, right? So it refers to a measure that considers various factors or dimensions beyond income to assess and also understand poverty. And in fact, I've just told you that this multidimensional poverty usually encompass various deprivations or multiple deprivations. For example, poor health, lack of education, inadequate living standards, lack of housing, poor quality of work, the violence that they face at the workplaces. So all these things can be considered part of multidimensional poverty index. And in fact, the Sustainable Development Goals, I have mentioned those sustainable I've talked about the sustainable development goals time and again. So UN releases 17 sustainable development goals. In the implementation period is 2015 to 2030. So it is aimed that these 17 sustainable development goals should be achieved by the year 2030, right? So these 17 UN sustainable development goals should be achieved by the year 2030, starting from 2015. So I would like to suggest you to go to the sustainable development goals and have a look at all 17 sustainable development goals, right? So in fact, the sustainable development goals talks about zero hunger, no poverty, health care access, education, gender equality, and access to drinking water, sanitation, and innovation, infrastructure, regional inequalities or reducing inequalities, life on land and life below the water. So all these things are being part of the 17 sustainable development goals. And in fact, reducing poverty is one of the sustainable development goal number 1, right? So ending poverty in all its forms everywhere is one of the sustainable development goal. So therefore it entails poverty should not just be viewed solely in relation to the income and consumption. So poverty is not just about the income and consumption, so it is also about access to the basic services. So I would like to suggest you to go through all the sustainable development goals so that it will be helpful for the exam as well, right? So if we have time, we'll also discuss the sustainable development goals as well. So at the global level, there is a global multidimensional poverty index, and in India also national multidimensional poverty index. And who releases global multidimensional poverty index? United Nations Development Program releases global multidimensional poverty index, but in India Niti Aayog releases national multidimensional poverty index. And in fact, at the global level, the multidimensional poverty index is a measure of multidimensional poverty which covers 100 developing countries, right? So it actually covers 100 developing countries, and it is developed in 2010 by OPHI and United Nations Development Program for the Human Development Reports. And for India, the global multidimensional poverty index uses National Family Health Survey data. Remember that this is very, very important. The global multidimensional poverty index uses which of the following, right? So in order to compile the multidimensional poverty ranking for India, the global multidimensional poverty index uses data from which of the following? So the answer is National Family Health Survey. So we all knew that the National Family Health Survey conduct surveys regularly. It also publishes data on family health. So therefore it uses National Family Health Survey. And in fact, in India, Niti Aayog is the nodal agency which is responsible for monitoring the mechanism of global multidimensional poverty index in India. So that is what you should understand. And then National Multidimensional Poverty Index, as we have just told you, that we have just discussed, that it is developed by Niti Aayog and it aligns with the development priorities as well as global multidimensional poverty index. And in fact, the National Multidimensional Poverty Index, it measures the multidimensional poverty at the state and even at the district levels across different parts of India. And in fact, this National Multidimensional Poverty Index helps identifying poverty at granular levels, aiding in targeted policy interventions. And in fact, so Niti Aayog monitors the implementation of National Multidimensional Poverty Index. So see, this is very, very important for your exam. So make sure you have understood this. So you have understood what is multidimensional poverty. And when we talk about the multidimensional poverty at the global level, so the Multidimensional Poverty Index is released by UNDP. At the level of India, it is being released by Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog monitors, it releases National Multidimensional Poverty Index. And next article is that Prime Minister's Mega Integrated Textile Region and Apparel Park Scheme. So this scheme is also known as PM Mitra Scheme. See, one thing that you need to remember, that you may get a question that what is PM Mitra Scheme. So PM Mitra Scheme is launched for the purpose, what is the purpose, what is the objective of PM Mitra Scheme? So you just have to remember that this is Prime Minister Mega Integrated Textile Region and Apparel Park Scheme. Okay, so in fact, the PM Mitra Park Scheme inspired by 5F vision, right? So it is inspired by 5F vision. So what is this 5F vision? So it is farm to fiber, and fiber to factory, and factory to fashion, and fashion to foreign of Prime Minister. So you may also get a question that a 5F vision is in the context of which of the following things? So this is in the context of PM Mitra scheme. So PM Mitra scheme is with respect to the textile park, or making India a global textile manufacturing hub, right? So to make India a global hub for textile manufacturing and export. Now what are the main objectives of PM Mitra scheme? So it wanted to develop integrated large scale and modern industrial infrastructure facility, including plug and play facilities for total value chain for the textile industry in India. So its objective is to reduce the logistic costs and also help India attract large scale foreign direct investment in manufacturing sector, because textile manufacturing is one sector which has the potential to create large scale employment opportunities. So thereby it can boost employment generation, and in fact it could also position itself strongly in the global textile market through augmentation of the export potential. Okay, so 7 PM Mitra parks are announced as part of this PM Mitra parks scheme. So where they are being set up, so a greenfield textile park will be established in the state of Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow. And secondly, Madhya Pradesh, a greenfield textile park will be established at a place called Dhar, and in Telangana, particularly in Warangal, this is a brownfield project. So I'll tell you what is a greenfield project and what is a brownfield project later, right? So greenfield and brownfield project. So when we talk about the greenfield project, so it means a new project. So we are going to start from scratch. Okay, so we are going to start from scratch. It is a new project. But on the other hand, when we talk about the brownfield project, so already a project is existing. It is maybe unviable, it is maybe old. As part of the greenfield project, what we are doing, so we are further developing infrastructure, we are further investing on the existing project. So that is a brownfield project. But greenfield project is a new project that we are starting from the scratch. So I hope you have understood what is a greenfield project and what is a brownfield project, right? So a Telangana, Warangal, a brownfield project will be established, a brownfield park will be established as part of PM Mitra scheme. And in Tamil Nadu, a greenfield park at Virudunagar will be established. And in Karnataka, Kalaburgi, a greenfield project. And in Maharashtra, Amaravati, a brownfield project. And in Gujarat, Navsari, greenfield project. So remember that this is very, very important. So you should not forget this. So you have to know. So 7 textile parks will be established, and they will be established in these different states and in these different parts, along with the whether they are a greenfield or brownfield projects. So you just have to remember, because I've told you that what is a greenfield and what is a brownfield project. Next, foreign direct investment into the space sector in India. So we knew that ISRO in recent times make rapid strides, right? So ISRO has made a rapid strides, and apart from that, in order to encourage private sector in space, recently a new Space India Limited is established, right? So new Space India Limited is established to encourage participation of private sector in space related activities, because we can see how the SpaceX making a lot of technological advancements in the arena of space. So it could potentially revolutionize, because space is a huge market. And it develops new technologies. it is a more and more innovative, and that could have implications for the overall socio-economic development, because the space sector can develop technologies and those technologies can be transferred to the industry, right? So, and apart from that, those technologies can also be used for the socio-economic development of our country. And the government has understood and identified the potential of the private sector in space, and because of that reason, recently the government has taken a decision that 100% foreign direct investment will be allowed into the space sector. And in fact, this is in line with the vision and strategy of Indian Space Policy 2023, right? So one thing that you need to remember here, Indian Space Policy is launched in which year? It is launched in 2023. And how much FDI is allowed into Indian space sector? 100% foreign direct investment is allowed into Indian space sector. And in fact, the liberalized entry routes are aimed to attract potential investors to invest in Indian companies in space. So there are certain FDI limits are also being imposed for satellite subsector division. For example, up to 100% under automatic route, right? So there are two different routes of FDI. One is automatic route and the other is government approval route. Now in automatic route, you don't need the approval of the government, but on the other hand, there are some sensitive strategic areas, strategic sectors where you require the approval of the government, right? So for example, 100% FDI under automatic route is allowed in manufacturing components and systems, subsystems for the satellites, ground segment and the user segment, but only 74% of FDI is allowed under automatic route in certain areas such as satellite manufacturing, operation, satellite data products, ground segment and the user segment. And beyond 74%, these activities requires the government route. I've told you that automatic route and the government approval route. So but beyond 74% in these specific areas requires the government's approval, and then up to 49% under the automatic route, right? So launch vehicles and associated systems or subsystems, creation of spaceports for launching and receiving spacecraft. So beyond 49% in these activities also requires the government's approval or the permission from the government. Next, so Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs. So we'll try to understand this. So what is this Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs? So recently the 7th session, right? So a 7th session of the Codex Committee, 7th session of the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs was held at Kochi. Remember that this is very important. You may get a question that a 7th session of Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary held at which of the following places? It held at Kochi. And in fact, this Codex Committee 7th session also set standards for 5 different species, spices. So they are small cardamom, turmeric, juniper berry, allspice and star anise were the finalized, right? So these are 5 spices. For them, standards were set, right? So standards were set in the 7th session of the Codex Committee. So about the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs. Now, some details that this Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs was established as one of the commodity committees under CAC in 2013. Okay, so CAC is Codex Alimentarius Commission. And India hosts this Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs since the beginning of Spice Board in India. And remember that this Spice Board comes under Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and this Spice Board, India serves as a secretariat organization for this Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs. Okay, so in fact, this Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs to elaborate on worldwide standards for spices and culinary herbs in their dried and dehydrated states. Now, what is the genesis of the Codex Alimentarius Commission? So we'll try to understand what exactly is this Codex Alimentary Commission, which set standards for various food products at the international level. So this Codex Alimentarius Commission, an international food standard body. For example, in India, we have Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, 2006, a statutory body. In a similar way, at the international level, we have the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So this is international food standard body. It is established jointly by the Food and Agriculture Organization plus World Health Organization in the year 1963. Remember that this is very important. Food and Agriculture Organization and World Health Organization jointly established this Codex Alimentary Commission in the year 1963. Now, what is the objective of this Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs? This Codex Alimentary Commission, the objective is protecting consumers' health and also ensuring fair practices in food trade, or some of the objectives of the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs. So when we talk about the members, so there are 189 Codex members, and India is also a member of this Codex Alimentarius Commission. So all these things are very important. So there are 189 Codex members, and India is also a member of Codex Alimentarius Commission, and in fact they were jointly this was jointly established by Food and Agriculture Organization and World Health Organization in the year 1963. So the functions of Codex Alimentarius Commission it works through various codex committees, including the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs, which are being hosted by different member countries. So codex standards are not mandatory, but they are voluntary, and they can be general, and they can also be recognized by WTO agreements as a reference standards for the import and export of these different food products. So the next one is World Trade Organization. So some details with respect to the World Trade Organization. So because specifically for prelims examination, right? So you may get a question on World Trade Organization as well, because it is recently in news. So that's why we'll try to understand this as well, right? So World Trade Organization is an international organization which deals with the world trade, right? So it deals with the world trade, so whose primary purpose is to open trade for the benefit of all. For example, if India wanted to export goods to China, so if both India and China are members of WTO, China should not impose arbitrary restrictions on India's goods which are being exported to China, right? So the overall objective of WTO is to promote free trade, and it is for the benefit of all, and it is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between the nations, right? So the other thing is that World Trade Organization is the only international organization dealing with the rules of trade between the nations. So when was this World Trade Organization established? So it was established on 1st January 1995, right? So it was established in 1st January 1995. So you just have to remember this, because this is very important. And it was created by Uruguay round negotiations 1986 to 94, and the headquarters of the World Trade Organization is located in Geneva, Switzerland. So total 166 member countries which are part of the World Trade Organization, okay? So including Comoros and Timor-Leste, so they were being part of it, WTO, in the year 2024, and India is the founding member of the World Trade Organization. So you just have to remember its headquarters, the members, whether India is a member or not. India is a member of it, and WTO was created by Uruguay round negotiations that took place from 1986 to 1994, and it was established in January 1st, 1995. Now, so as I've told you that the objective of World Trade Organization is to raise standard of living, create jobs, and also improve people's lives. So what is the organizational structure of World Trade Organization? So World Trade Organization consisting of General Council and a ministerial conference, right? So ministerial conference is the highest decision making body of the World Trade Organization, and it usually meet once in 2 years. So ministerial conference is the highest decision making body of the WTO. The ministerial conference, it generally meet once in 2 years. So when we talk about the General Council, so WTO's decision making body in Geneva and meeting regularly to carry out functions of World Trade Organization. So the General Council also meets as a dispute settlement body, as a trade policy review body, and it has certain functions, right? So trade negotiations, trade arrangements, dealing with trade disputes, and monitoring the national trade policies of different countries, and also technical assistance and training. So these are some details. Please go through all the details of the WTO, because it is very, very important from your exam perspective. So next is Human Development Report, HDR report of 23-24, and so this Human Development Report is released by the United Nations Development Program. So we have just discussed that apart from the Human Development Report, so UNDP also releases another report, that is the Multidimensional Poverty Index. So therefore, United Nations Development Program has been releasing this Human Development Report since 1990s, right? So since 1990s, this United Nations Development Program has been releasing the Human Development Report, and in fact the Human Development Report of UNDP examines major global challenges that affect human development and also suggest recommendations for the same. And in fact, so when we talk about the Human Development Index and the parameters which are taken into consideration by the UNDP while assessing the human development of different countries, so it looks into 3 basic dimensions of human development. Remember that this was asked in UPSC in the year 2016, right? So 3 important dimensions that are taken into consideration by the UNDP, including long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. A decent standard of living, long and healthy life, and knowledge. So these are 3 important parameters or dimensions which are being taken into consideration by the UNDP to compile Human Development Report of different countries, right? So when we talk about the Human Development Index in the year 2021, so India ranked 135. So India's rank was 135 in the year 2021, so out of 191 countries. So India's score at that point of time was 0.633. However, so in the year 2022, significantly India has just improved 1 rank. So now in the year 2023, India's rank is 134 out of 193 countries. Now India's score is 0.644. So lowest score means lowest, a poor ranking in the Human Development Report. So highest score means good ranking of countries in the Human Development Report. So there are some other indicators. Life expectancy in India as per the Human Development Report is that 67.7 years is the life expectancy, and expected years of schooling in India is around 12.6 years, and the gross national per capita income is $6,591 in India. And gender inequality index in the year 21, so India ranked 122 out of 191 countries. Its score was 0.490, right? So in 2022, so India ranked 108 out of 193 countries, right? So there is an improvement of India's ranking in gender inequality index. So the next one is household consumption expenditure survey. So we'll try to understand this as well. So what exactly is household consumption expenditure survey 22-23? So first thing that we need to remember is that it is being released by National Sample Survey Office, NSSO. So National Sample Survey Office, NSSO has released this household consumption expenditure survey of 22-23 after a gap of 10 years, and because of that reason it is very important and significant, because NSSO has released this household consumption expenditure survey after a gap of over 10 years since last survey was conducted way back in the year 2011 and 12. See, remember, because it is delayed, and that is why it is very important, right? So I've just told you that the National Sample Survey Office releases the household consumption expenditure survey, and it is released after a gap of 10 years since over 10 years since last survey. And apart from that, the household consumption expenditure survey objective is that it is designed to collect information on the consumption of goods and services by various households, and it is conducted by National Sample Survey Office, and this National Sample Survey Office is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, right? So this is the ministry. NSSO is under this ministry, and it has been conducting household consumption expenditure survey at regular intervals, but this time it is delayed by almost 10 years. Now, what is the utility and importance of this household consumption expenditure survey? The data is useful for understanding consumption and expenditure patterns of households and the standard of living of the people, as well as the overall well-being of the individuals, right? This is also very, very important, so you just have to keep track of it. So some details with respect to National Sample Survey Office. Now, it is part of the subordinate office of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and the National Statistical Office consists of Central Statistical Organization and National Sample Survey Office, right? So NSO consisting of two different bodies, so that is National Sample Survey Office, right? So sample NSSO, along with that Central Statistical Organization. So what is the purpose? The purpose is to conduct large scale sample surveys in diverse fields on all India basis. So there are some functions and responsibilities of the National Sample Survey Office, right? So it conduct periodic labor force survey, annual survey of industries, and urban frame survey. So these are the surveys which are being conducted by National Sample Survey Office, and it also collect data on rural and urban prices, and it plays a very important role in the improvement of crop statistics every year, and it also maintains a frame of urban area units for the use of sample survey in urban areas. So these are some of the functions and responsibilities, but in this it is very important that you need to remember what are the other surveys which are released by NSSO, and also remember that NSSO is part of National Statistical Office, and under National Statistical Office there are two different bodies, Central Statistical Organization and National Sample Survey Office, and NSO is part of Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Next, Reserve Bank's Integrated Ombudsman Scheme, RBIOS, right? So we'll try to understand this as well. So Reserve Bank of India has recently released annual report on Ombudsman Scheme of 2022-23. Now, what is this Ombudsman Scheme? So Ombudsman Scheme means Reserve Bank of India is known as banker of banks. Banker of banks, and in fact Reserve Bank of India is a top bank in India. So because of that reason, and it is the responsibility of the Reserve Bank of India to regulate all other banks in India, and because of that reason RBI has come up with an ombudsman scheme. So in case if any bank don't comply with the rules and regulations of the Reserve Bank of India, any individual or any actively banking individual can complain to the RBI about the bank through this ombudsman scheme. And in fact the ombudsman scheme is formed through or framed by RBI in exercise of its powers which are being conferred under various legislations such as the Banking Regulations Act 1949, RBI Act 1934, and Payments and Settlements Act of 2017. Now, what is the objective? The objective is to provide cost-free redressal of customer complaints, right? So customers can go to this ombudsman page of RBI and they can file a complaint about the banking system and the poor services which are being delivered by different banks across the country. So because in India, banks are being regulated by the Reserve Bank of India. So Ombudsman scheme adopts one nation, one ombudsman approach by making RBI ombudsman mechanism jurisdiction neutral, right? And apart from that, so the scheme covers the following regulated entities. So the entities including all commercial banks, regional rural banks RRBs, and scheduled primary cooperative banks, non-scheduled primary urban cooperative banks with a deposit size of 50 crore and above, and all non-banking finance companies except housing finance companies. They are authorized to accept deposits or have customer interface with assets size of 100 crore and above, right? So these are different banks which are being covered under integrated ombudsman scheme. So that's all in this particular session. So we'll be discussing a few more economy related current affairs in the coming sessions. Thank you.